A few hours later, we continued to trek along the simple path, the colorful plants and occasional trees of the open prairie here rather pleasing. As we moved along, however, I noticed something about my body. I seemed rather sore, a lot stiffer than I would have expected. Yes, something was wrong. I was feeling a lot more tired and worn out than I should, to the point where I began to fear I was under some sort of magical effect. Are any of you really stiff and sore? I asked, flexing my hands and neck to try and make myself feel a little more comfortable. Come to think of it, I do feel not quite myself, Redfern recognized, flexing his own muscles and concerned. I feel it too, Eswin added, massaging his own neck. Is this that aging sickness we encountered back in Leakley? It must be, Cartha replied, herself bothered by it as well. It appears we're all afflicted. Talking it over amongst ourselves, yes, the aging sickness was making all of us feel a good 10 years older already, resulting in the temporary loss of constitution. We needed to end this ailment as soon as possible. Suddenly, a loud screech ripped through the air, and all of us turned toward the noise, looking about. Currently standing within a small depression within the prairie, I didn't see anything, but I couldn't quite see the horizon in the distance either. Several further screeches were heard, followed by a dull pounding that appeared to be nearing us. Several bird-like, reptilian creatures then appeared above us, flying about as if they were considering us prey. The wings of these beasts were some 30 feet across and their beak-like mouths were lined with sharp teeth, appearing as dangerous adversaries. Far worse, however, was the monstrous dinosaur that had just appeared at the edge of the depression we were standing within. The creature was enormous, at least 30 feet from nose to tail, and its head was some 6 feet in width, filled with teeth some 3 to 6 inches in length. Together, the pteranodons and the Tyrannosaurus rex appeared to be very formidable monsters. What to do? Recognizing we couldn't possibly outrun the monsters, we decided on defense, drawing into a small group with our backs to one another, preparing ourselves for one hell of a fight. The flying pteranodons and the massive T-Rex then darted in our direction, seeing us as prey needing to be ripped apart and devoured. Essentially giant-sized pterodactyls, the 5 pteranodons each had a wingspan of 25 to 30 feet and were skilled predators known for attacking entire adventuring parties. As they swooped in, our party fired a volley of projectiles from our missile weapons, doing minimal damage. The T-Rex was a bipedal carnivorous dinosaur that, despite its enormous size and 6-ton weight, was a swift runner. With a 6-foot head and teeth that were 3 to 6 inches in length, the T-Rex had no natural predators and pursued and ate just about anything it saw. Hence, despite the threat of the pteranodons, it was the T-Rex we had to quickly defeat or be defeated and eaten alive. After some 20 minutes of intense combat, we were able to chase the pteranodons away. The T-Rex was stubborn, however, and continued to fight even after seemingly defeated. Finally, the massive beast stumbled about and fell backward, slamming to the ground and expiring, fresh blood oozing from its open mouth. That dark merchant back in Leakley did say the wilderness out here was dangerous. Ariana was the first to speak, dressing her wounds. What were those things? Ancient beasts, even from before the Age of Damnation I believe, Sainairs answered, apparently knowledgeable to some degree. Grimtier has always been filled with monsters, it's why the drow were banished here and everyone else avoids the island. Let's hope we don't encounter any more of those things, Eswin added, still nearly out of breath. Let's go. The harrowing encounter with the dinosaurs over, we continued our trek northwest, the manor of Ballybus still out of sight in the direction of the forest some 6 hours or so away. Continuing along the path leading northwest, the forest ahead just another few hours or so away, we came to a large, stately manor here in the countryside, not all that different from Baron Renwald's mansion we encountered back in Hope Air some time ago. As we approached, however, it became clear that something was amiss, as the entire building appeared colored in an orangish-yellow hue. Looking about, I didn't see any definitive threats, so I led my party to the front stairway of the manor to have a closer look. Inspecting the building exterior as thoroughly as we could, it was clearly coated in some orangish-yellow goo, hardened into something stone-like but quite sticky to the touch. Whatever the material was, the substance was quite thick, at least a foot, and hence barred any sort of entry into the manor within. This is amber, Redfern finally announced, surprised by the find. It's as if some giant poured thousands of gallons of amber atop the mansion and let it harden, encasing it completely. What could do something like this? Ariana wondered aloud, quite surprised by the find. I am not aware of any natural process that could do this, monstrous or otherwise, Redfern answered, knowing that Ariana's question was rhetorical. This is quite the mystery. Preoccupied with the amber-covered manor, my heroes were nearly surprised by the sudden attack of several old gods, the cursed treants pouncing on our party and initiating fierce combat. Having faced the cursed treants before, we knew how to fight them, and how to avoid being captured by them and having our life force sucked out of us. Still, the monsters were very difficult to defeat, taking the next 10 minutes or so to put 3 of the old gods down. As the creatures went down, however, we quickly discovered a dozen more shambling forward to destroy us. The situation suddenly looked grim. Enough! A woman cried out from beyond, her voice amplified by strong magic. To our surprise, the cursed treants slowly backed away. In turn, an older human woman dressed almost as a druid was revealed perhaps 30 feet away, the Strenigoris clearly responding to her. Surrender, or I will have the treants rip the flesh from your bones. The woman began as she approached, quite the surprise in a day already full of surprises. Getting our first look at her, the human woman appeared rather old, dressed in older, unflattering robes that covered most of her body. Despite her appearance, the old woman was likely a powerful magic user, and her demeanor and body language suggested that she should be respected and, at least for now, obeyed. Fortunately, I also sensed that she wasn't here to do us any real harm. What on Sicilus are adventurers doing in Grimtier? The elderly woman then asked, eyeing all of us over. None of you should be here. It's a long story, I responded, trying not to give too much away. We were teleported to Leakley, learned of the aging sickness affecting the drow there and came here looking for a magic user named Balybus. Do you know him? Why are you looking for him? The old woman asked, even more suspicious now. Lord de Enzith back in Leakley told us that Balybus was able to treat his aging sickness, Redfern responded honestly. We've come to see what more he may know and whether he can do more. The woman peered at Redfern as if she could deduce the truth with just a stare. Balybus certainly won't help with that. But come, it's too dangerous to talk out here in the open, especially alongside his manor. Quickly, this way. The woman pointed in the direction of the forest about a 2 hours march ahead to the northwest. Our heroes naturally turned to me, quite concerned. I don't trust her, Sainairs whispered to me, all eyes on the old woman. It appears she's in league with the Strenigoris, we should attack. No, we should listen. Cartha countered, suggesting that we follow the woman's advice. She could destroy us if she really wanted to, we should trust her. The woman stared at us intensely and her cursed treants were poised to continue their attack. What to do? So, we will call this a truce? I suggested, relying on my diplomacy skills to address the situation. I mean you no harm, the woman replied, her eyes sincere. But we need to talk first before you try any sort of action here, there is a lot you don't know. The older woman then leaped into the branches of one of the nearest treants and commanded all of us northwest along the road. Clearly, she had control over these creatures. From what I had learned, and recently experienced in Leakley, the cursed treants, the old gods, aka the Strenigoris, were dangerous monsters to be feared. Yet this woman had some sort of bond with them, so, perhaps, they weren't as terrible as we had been led to believe? The sorceress commanded all to follow, the treants both leading and taking up the rear, preventing any escape if that was my plan. Hence, at this point, it did seem like we would need to trust the old woman leading us toward the forest beyond. The Strenigoris are taking us to their lair in the forest. Sainairs warned, quite agitated now. Once we arrive, we must initiate holy war and destroy every single one of them. On our own? Cartha retorted, once again contradicting him. The human sorceress seems to be their ally as well, we have no chance against these treants. Staring at Sainairs, I concluded that he must really hate these creatures and I worried that his vengeance was only going to cause additional trouble. The old sorceress continued to lead the way to the forest, atop one of the cursed treants and at least a dozen more treants walking alongside and behind us. Along the way, the creatures eyed us like an enemy, making the short journey to the forest quite stressful. Fortunately, the treants kept their distance, allowing us to reach the entrance without issue. Watching the treants carefully, they seemed like strange creatures, wood-based humanoid life forms that appeared like walking trees. They did have eyes, and while they appeared to be glowing red, I sensed that they were not evil. Rather, they seemed almost possessed, as if they were unable to move or think on their own. Stop! The old magic user suddenly cried, raising her right hand to indicate that everyone should immediately stop and hold their position. Tense moments passed, none of us sure of what was happening. The woman ahead was quite anxious, however, and even the treants here seemed to be nervous as well. Carefully examining some of the trees here marking the forest entrance, I spotted a few that looked very similar to the treants standing around us. Could they be additional treants, hiding for some reason? Suddenly, a dozen or so well-camouflaged treants sprang to life just inside the forest entrance, belting out a war cry as they rushed to attack. The tree men around me rushed their marauding brethren, initiating a strange battle that pitted treant against treant. This must be another faction. Red Fern shouted, preparing for battle as well. The sorceress ahead must not control them. The treants engaged one another, pummeling each other with their giant woody fists and, occasionally, attempting to suck the life force from one another as well. The elderly sorceress then began fighting off the attacking treants with her impressive magic. As we stood there and monitored the strange battle, several of the gorilla treants then suddenly rushed our party, forcing us to defend ourselves. For the next 10 minutes, we battled 3 of the cursed treants alongside the much larger battle between the 2 treant factions. Just as we forced the treants attacking us to retreat, the others that had tried to ambush all of us retreated as well and quickly melted back into the forest. My party and the treants under the control of the old sorceress ahead had apparently won the conflict. From what we had just witnessed, there appeared to be at least 2 factions of treants here in the forest, one under the control of the mysterious sorceress leading us in a second, more savage and dangerous faction. I certainly couldn't trust the woman or her tree men faction yet, but they seemed the lesser of 2 evils. I then noticed that several of the treants near our party had been significantly wounded in the ambush, the strange creatures able to communicate their pain to one another. Recognizing that the treants had been wounded, I asked the clerics if they could heal them in some way. The woodmen were paranoid at first and wouldn't let our party near them, but Cartha was able to heal an initial few and soon our clerics were doing an admirable job of healing all the wounded treants. That was close, the woman acknowledged, glancing back into the deep forest. More and more treants are falling to the curse. Soon, they will all succumb and the damage will be permanent. What curse? Cartha asked, naturally concerned. The same curse that is aging everyone prematurely, the sorceress answered, equally worried. But let's not dawdle, we need to continue on our way before more of the cursed treants find us and attack. Without truly answering Cartha's question, or even introducing herself yet, I began to follow the sorceress again, the woman leading her small treant force into the forest and along a path deeper into the wood. As we continued our march, Sainair stepped to me, quite agitated now. Stay sharp, Lam Tora. She's probably leading us to the very lair of the Strenigoris. We can destroy them all there, in a single attack. Nodding to Sainairs, we continued on our way into the forest. Continuing to follow the older human woman, she spent a few additional hours leading us deep into the forest, its dark ambience reminding me of our penetration into the evil root forest before our encounter with Sandaria and the destruction of the onyx seal. A variety of eyes watched as we passed by, the forest full of creatures that, likely, were dangerous if we stopped to interact with them. Hence, the further we marched, the more concerned I became. As we proceeded, I did notice signs of damage along the forest path, places where it appeared some sort of small battle had taken place. The trees, especially, seemed damaged here and there, long scrapes and gouges in the trunks and many of their branches broken and even torn off altogether. Just as the trek through the forest really started to get grueling, however, we reached a modest clearing, the canopy not so thick and thus allowing some light to penetrate. Indeed, the small clearing had a bit of a glow about it and I instinctively felt that we had reached some sort of haven within the wood. The woman ahead leading the treants motioned us forward, her soft grin encouraging us to trust her. Eswin took a quick look around, then nodded affirmatively, leading the way. As we entered the clearing, nearly a dozen much smaller treants suddenly rose to their feet and came racing toward us. Their faces so overjoyed that they seemed possessed and their arms outstretched, it was as if they were about to try and capture all of us. Concerned that we were about to be attacked by the diminutive woody creatures, they rushed past all of us and into the open arms of the much larger treants that were accompanying us, as if they were children rushing to welcome back their parents, which they were. A little embarrassed, I smiled nonetheless, the scene warming to the heart. Still think they're the Strenigoris? Kartha ridiculed as she stepped past Sainairs, the Sislan quite surprised by the encounter and now not sure what to think. The embrace between the smaller treants and their much larger counterparts was long and tender. Clearly, these creatures were not only intelligent but capable of human-like emotions, especially love. As the treant families stepped away for the interior of the clearing, I also noticed that the redness in the parent treant eyes, the strange, possessed glow they had, was now gone. Something seemed to have dispelled the possession magic, allowing the treants to behave in a much more friendly manner. One of the largest treants that had been waiting in the clearing then slowly approached the old woman who led us here, reaching for her and tenderly embracing the human with several of its branches. "Welcome home, O fairies," the treant said with conviction. "We were worried for all of you." "We have guests," the old woman responded, pointing in my party's direction. "I believe they can help." The large treant bowed magnificently, exposing her royal lineage. "Welcome, heroes, to our humble grove," the female treant said, introducing herself. "I am Queen Willowheart and I lead these treants here." She was a queen to hundreds more here in the forest, the elderly sorceress added, saddened. Now she is the last of her royal lineage. Speaking in their native treant language, Ariana properly greeted the queen, doing an adequate job of it. The treant queen responded in the elven language, its meaning lost to me, but my impression most favorable. "We have much to discuss," the sorceress interjected, pointing toward a small stone house near the far end of the clearing. "But first, let's eat and relax, it's been a long day." Both the human and the treant led us to a small stone picnic table just outside the house beyond, several more of the treants bringing food and drink and providing surprisingly warm hospitality. The dining began and for the first few minutes all my party could do was graciously consume the various berries, vegetables, and bread provided, the food so much better than our standard rations. The several dozen treants all sat down around us as well, pushing their roots into the floor of the relative clearing to draw up their own needed water and nutrients. "So, you're the sister of Balybus, you said?" Kartha began, getting the much-needed conversation started. "I am O Fairies, and yes, I am his younger sister. Magic has always been strong in our family," O Fairies responded, her demeanor growing serious. "Both our parents were powerful magic users, yet they were also kind and gentle, only using their power to help and protect those in need. Eventually they attracted the attention of the inner circle, and after joining them, they quickly rose in strength and power. Then, they started talking about becoming truistics." Several eyes turned to Redfern, the magic user himself suddenly embarrassed and looking away. "And did they survive the ritual?" Sainairs asked, knowing full well the likely fate that awaited them. O Fairies sneered as she continued, her serious look turning to anger and even hatred. "They were everything a truistic is supposed to be, kind and loving, always putting others before themselves, their empathy and altruism second to none. They were ideal candidates, and the circle itself assured us that they would not just survive the ritual but become circle representatives themselves someday. So, they climbed Mount Rebirth and with all the faith in the world, flung themselves together into the throat of the volcano, and they both fell to their deaths. The story was shocking, losing both parents at once to a ritual they should easily have survived. The more I learned about Mount Rebirth, the more I wanted to stay away from it. From that day forward, Balybus and I hated the circle," O Fairies hissed, still emotionally scarred from the loss of her parents. "And the more we learned about them, the more we knew that the circle needed to be destroyed, once and for all." "Destroyed?" Redfern asked, surprised. "You would see the circle and all its truistics destroyed?" In a heartbeat, the elderly sorceress replied, quite angry. "They have so lost their way that the only thing left to do is destroy them." "Forgive me, but you sound a lot like the Ultimates," Kartha commented, her tone still respectful. "They, too, want nothing more than to see all the truistics destroyed. The Ultimates are sick with the Nemfruit," O Fairies condemned, not an ally of them whatsoever. "They even tried to grow one of their nemesis plants here nearby years ago. So we ate it," the treant Queen Willowheart professed, almost with a grin. "The plant tasted terrible but we rid ourselves of the sentient creature. Truth be told, we've become enemies of the circle ourselves," Redfern confessed, perhaps revealing a bit too much. "They captured us recently and we fought them, it's how we ended up here." "You fought them? And survived?" O Fairies exclaimed, shocked. "Don't lie to us." "It's not a lie," I responded, looking O Fairies squarely in the eyes. "We're not sure what happened ourselves, but we were teleported here, just outside of Leakley. Bah! Queen Willowheart retorted, suddenly unhappy. I hate those disgusting dark elves. Still focused entirely on me, Fairies stood and slowly approached, her look most serious. May I see for myself? I knew the drill by now. Fairies was asking to use her magic to invade my mind and experience everything I had experienced recently. It's not just a painful process but a highly invasive one, sharing my memories with another person, and in this case, a complete stranger. Agreeing, I asked Fairies to look hard and deep, hoping she could learn something that perhaps I didn't even know yet. The sorceress agreed, then placed both hands around my head, closing her eyes and beginning the process. As when Representative Margaret did the same thing back in Tobin some time ago, the experience was quite painful. Knowing what to expect this time, however, I got through the ritual relatively unscathed. Fairies opened her eyes and immediately looked at Redfern, as if he were some strange creature. She then turned back to me, profoundly serious. You were brought here for a reason. My heroes naturally needing to know more, Fairies continued, the sorceress remaining alongside me. You're not just enemies of the circle now, you're destined to destroy them, and they know it. But you will need something, a powerful relic that brought my brother and I to this accursed island decades ago as well. Have you heard of the Wizard Bane? That sword is said to kill any magic user it strikes, Redfern almost whispered, the artifact quite deadly to his profession. It's just a myth meant to scare magic users, right? It's real, and a portal to its location lies underneath the manor encased in amber you saw, the sorceress replied, the news shocking. Ballybus and I have spent nearly 30 years trying to open the portal. What does that have to do with us? Eswin asked, not seeing the connection. The Wizard Bane has other powers, such as the ability to render its wielder and all within a 30-foot radius invisible to magic users as well. You'll need the Wizard Bane to hide from the circle until you're ready to face them again. So, you're suggesting we quest for this Wizard Bane sword? Eswin asked, now seeing the connection. It sounds like exactly the sort of thing we need against the circle. Which brings us back to my brother Ballybus, Fairies sighed, hanging her head low. He's not only after the Wizard Bane as well, but he's the one who caused this aging sickness, caused all this death. Fairies reached for Queen Willowheart, the latter gently wrapping several of her outer branches around the hand of the former. I sensed a strong bond between the two and waited for Fairies to continue. When we arrived here in search of the Wizard Bane, my brother was a good, decent man, a powerful magic user who, like me, wanted to avenge our parents and smite the circle. It took us a decade to find the portal leading to the artifact, but some 30 years later we still can't open it. How do you know so much about this artifact? Redfern asked. We didn't know much at first, the sorceress continued, her voice softer. Legend had it that the drow here in Grimtier forged the Wizard Bane to retaliate against the circle for banishing them here long ago, so we started looking. Then, after 10 years and no luck, my brother did something so stupid. Ballybus heard about the nemfruit in Chagaria, and how one could consume some of it and wish for something. Despite the dangers of what the fruit does to your soul, he snuck into Chagaria south of us, secured some nemfruit and did a wishing, needing to know the location of the Wizard Bane. And it worked? Redfern asked, sure that it did. You said you found a portal to the relic. A portal that can't be opened, the sorceress replied. Far worse, Ballybus was never the same after the wishing, slowly slipping into madness over the years and eventually succumbing to the evil of the fruit. After 3 decades of looking for a way to open the portal, my brother's health began to fade as well and we both knew he was dying, Fairies continued, her tale growing worse. Yet he was obsessed with opening the portal and finding the Wizard Bane. Without my knowledge, he cast a grand spell, one that would slowly suck the life out of the weaker drow here on the island and allow him to absorb that energy to keep himself alive. He's become a sort of vampire? Ariana asked, recalling the monsters we faced back in the poisoned dwarven ruins. Has he become undead? Fairies shrugged, indicating she wasn't sure. The Treant Queen then spoke, her news just as distressing. The magic of Ballybus wasn't limited to the drow. For you humanoids, it aged many of you unnaturally. For we Treants, it drove most of us mad, corrupting our souls and turning us against one another. I was able to set up a sort of temporary anti-magic shell here in the clearing, Fairies added, looking about. But my brother's life-draining magic is killing me as well, if we don't stop it soon, all of us are doomed. Where is this Ballybus? Eswin asked, not surprised that yet another sorcerer was causing havoc. The manor outside the forest, our home the past 3 decades, Fairies responded. The spell he wove sort of stopped time itself, encasing our manor in a magic bubble of ember. There is no way in. But the manor rests upon some ancient dark elf ruins, where Balybus is sure to be, Queen Willowheart continued, offering a plan. I know where we can dig our way into the ruins, but we don't have the strength to confront Balybus directly. Will you help? I nodded affirmatively, and both Fairies and Queen Willowheart smiled, hoping that we would join their cause. Is your brother alone, or does he have minions down there as well? Eswin asked, the warrior already starting to chart battle tactics in his mind. I am sure he's defending himself with something, Fairies answered, quite concerned. He must realize an attack is coming at some point, so I am sure he will be ready. And why did you leave him? Kartha asked, sensing there was more to learn. My brother is convinced of his own self-righteousness, Fairies answered in a soft, apologetic tone. He truly believes that the end justifies the means, that stealing the life forces of many of the dark elves to keep himself alive is a goodly act so long as he can retrieve the wizard bane and one day destroy the inner circle with it. I love my brother, but I couldn't allow him to hurt so many just to stay alive, so I left, vowing to stop him one day. We have been friends for nearly a decade, Queen Willowheart added, glancing at Fairies with a smile. She vowed to protect our Treant family, even when her brother's evil magic started causing our kind to go insane. Balybus does not deserve a sister like Fairies. The elderly sorceress smiled and nodded, her bond with the queen quite strong. From my experiences the past few hours, I sensed that Fairies and Queen Willowheart genuinely meant well, so much so that Fairies appeared ready to defeat, perhaps even kill, her own brother to stop the aging sickness that was tormenting so many here in Grimtier. To strike down someone you love must be a terrible decision, and I couldn't help but feel sorry for Fairies. I will inform my subjects, Queen Willowheart said, about to turn away. I will send my strongest to aid you. So be it, Fairies stated, standing at her feet and turning to me. All of you are welcome to rest and recover within my home. When you're ready, let me know and we will set out for Balybus. Make sure you're at full strength before we leave. My heroes all nodded, recognizing the challenges ahead. Fairies then led us 20 feet to her stone house where we could rest and recuperate. As we stepped toward the front door of Fairies' small home, I overheard Kartha ask something of Sainaeirs. Still think the Treants are the Strenigeris? Sainaeirs sneered at Kartha and then turned toward me, rather embarrassed. While the Sislan was absolutely loath to admit it, he nodded slightly and agreed. You're right, these creatures are not the Strenigeris and are not deserving of any holy war against them. And that's a wrap of episode number 51, Forest of the Old Gods. Expect additional episodes every few weeks as the story continues.